Welcome back. I thought it'd be a fun idea to talk about one of my favorite somewhat niche subgenres, which is weird girl literary fiction, feral girl summer literary fiction, cult books. I support women's rights and I support women's wrongs. You feel the vibe, and if you're here, you might already know the vibe. I thought about making my favorite list, but I thought it'd be more of a fun idea to talk about the books that I personally have on my shelf that fall into this category, because I think in this genre, a lot of books are hit or miss for a lot of people. So I didn't want to talk about my favorites and include the ones that weren't necessarily my favorites, but they were still good because maybe those are more to your taste. As you can tell, there's a beautiful bookshelf right behind me. And if you aren't aware, I have a huge bookshelf tour on my channel, but that isn't important today. I just wanted to say that I have this very specific spot saved for those type of books, and these are them. And I thought it'd be a nice idea to just go through them, tell you about them, tell you my thoughts on them, spoiler free, tell you if I would recommend it based on maybe other stuff you like. Now, I'm going to have to be very careful when I'm getting these books done because there is an open fire right next to me, but I thought it'd be more of the vibe if I had some candlelight. And let's just hope this doesn't go wrong and I set myself and my entire library on fire. I could have gotten them all down, but I thought it'd be nicer to have them in view already, so you get kind of a spoiler of what's to come. The first two books I'm going to talk about are the most recent additions to this shelf because I just read them and I also just bought them. And the first one is Supper Club by Laura Williams, and I literally just finished this yesterday, I think. For some of these, I might read the synopsis, but some of them I think I could sum up in my own words. In Supper Club, we follow almost 30-year-old Roberta, who's very, not necessarily miserable, but she has a very, in her eyes, boring and lonely life. So she starts a club. This club, of course, is called Supper Club. And what she wants to do with this club is unite women and show women that they can take up space and that they can be loud and full and eat until they're sick and just keep on eating after that point. That is what Supper Club is all about. And basically in the book we follow Roberta while the Supper Club thing is happening, but then also it switches to her past quite a lot, and there we learn how she met people in Supper Club, but also how and why she is in that mindset and why she wants to have Supper Club, even though back then she obviously didn't know about it. But we learn her reasons for needing a very powerful group of women in her life, and the way she's been wronged, and the ways that she's been messy herself. She's a very messy main character, but I love a messy main character, especially if it's only if it's a woman. And so that's what's happened in Supper Club, and yeah, we meet these wonderful female characters that are all very complex and some very unlikable. You could consider this main character very unlikable. I liked her because she's very real and relatable, and she doesn't shy away from the truth. And that's one thing I have to say about this book is it doesn't sugarcoat anything. It's very honest and truthful about everything going on. And if you do want to read this, please look up the trigger warnings, because there are some graphic descriptions of some trigger topics in this, so I think that's very important. But also I just love this cover, and I really I don't think it's in every chapter, but a lot of the times the Roberta is very passionate about cooking. She's like very, not even artistic about cooking, but she's very intense about cooking, and you can tell. And she has a lot of moments where she describes how she's cooking something, and it very much parallels to what's happening in her actual life, mostly in either the past or the present. And I thought it was very well done. While reading, I oftentimes thought I'd rate it a 5 star. I haven't rated it yet because I'm still making my mind about it. But I think just talking about this really reminded me how much I actually like this. So I do think this is a 5 star read, if not a 4 star, like nowhere lower than that, of course. How could I? I thought Laura Williams did a brilliant job. There's a lot of media references, a lot of pop culture references, and just the way she wrote these women, I thought was very magical and really honest. These are women who aren't shy or who are trying not to be shy, and I really like the whole concept of supper club. I don't think, well, we can discuss if it's only a positive experience supper club or if there's some controversy about it, but I personally thought it was a very positive thing. Taking up space is something women don't tend to do, and I think the way they did it was very dramatic and not gory. What's the word? Very meaty. um, but I thought it was a good way of doing it, and yeah, I just really enjoyed the cooking aspects of this the and the depiction of all of the internalized misogyny that a lot of these women go through in their own lives. And even though they have this powerful group of women slowly come into their life, they still really struggle and still go back to those harmful ways of thinking about themselves and themselves in relationships with men, especially. And I thought it was very well done, and I do think give this a try if it's calling your name, and please look up the trigger warnings. This is a very messy, chaotic, and gluttonous, very gluttonous book, and so if you do want to try it, please do. Like I said, but I will repeat myself about this, look up the trigger warnings. And I think this might be a common theme. I think this might be a common theme for most of these books, because the crazy girls tend to do crazy shit, or we learn why they're crazy, and most of them, probably all of them, have a good reason, and that reason is and most of those reasons are men, or the things that men have done, but that just goes back to the being men, so, it goes back to men. This is also a recent read of mine, and I also thought it would be quite interesting to mention that I have read every single book on this particular part of my shelf, which I think this might be one of the only shelves that I've read every single book on. If I don't mention your favorite Feral Girl book, please tell me which one it is. I did mention that some of these are culty books, which is, so to say, that they surround a cult of some sort. Most of these might not call themselves a cult, but from a viewer's point, this very much seems like a cult. But I do have to say, for Spoilt Creatures, while it did at times get very toxic and culty, this is my favorite cult so far, because especially the beginning, when of course you learn why the main character wanted to join this commune, you also are kind of like, yeah, I would join that too, of course. Living with a bunch of beautiful naked women, why wouldn't you? And then you kind of slowly get to learn more about this commune and the twists and turns and the toxic parts of the commune. But let me tell you more about the book. We follow Iris, who meets a girl called Hazel. And Iris lives a very miserable life, and one of her friends, I think, tells her that her sister joined this commune and she felt much better afterwards. And then Iris just calls that place up, and there's a lot of trial and error involved in her actually being able to join and them accepting her into their group. But yeah, from then on we just kind of learn from Iris's perspective what happened in that commune, and the lovely but then also devastating and horrible, miserable parts of that commune, and also the struggle of loving a place but also seeing the harm that it can do to people. And I thought it was brilliant. Just like Supper Club, I think might be a 5-star, and I think I like this even more than Supper Club. So maybe Supper Club is a 4.5 and this is a 5-star. Looking back, I definitely like this more, so this should be 5-star. And this commune, a woman's commune, is called Breach House, and like all communes, Breach House is directed, maybe, I'm not sure, by a person called Blythe. And this is, of course, also a woman. And it's really interesting how a group of women is looking for a place of safety and resort and content, and at some points they do find that at Breach House. But like most things tend to do, they go wrong. This is no exception to that, of course, and I thought it was very interesting. And like I said, I did at the beginning, I was like, I would too join that. This sounds lovely. They're dancing around fires, they're expressing themselves, they're not afraid of their bodies, and they garden and they live on this beautiful background, but you can definitely tell that some of these people might be toxic, and that sadly living like that can in some ways be very harmful. That is Spoilt Creatures, and I thought Amy Twig did a wonderful job at writing this. I didn't think I said her name before. Spoilt Creatures, Amy Twig, and I really love this picture. I'm going to look past the neon monstrosity because I just love this picture and this book a lot. I did think I would join this as well. I think I would fall into the same trap because it does seem lovely. And it is lovely. And I think Amy Twig did a wonderful job at showing that you can still love a place even though it's done a lot of bad things for yourself and for a lot of other people, but you still find a lot of beauty in that. And I think the complex part of that, the love and hate relationship you can have for something, was very well done in this. And this also switches in perspectives, which if you can notice anything, I do love that quite a bunch. I think there's 10 years between the two perspectives as she's reminiscing and remembering the past and the times that she was living in the commune. And there's also, of course, past Iris living at the commune and going through all of those things, those wonderful, terrible things. And I thought the perspective switching was really well done, and I really liked the ending of this book, so definitely recommend. It's obviously still fresh in my mind, but I really, really, really enjoyed this, and I really recommend this to you. And like I said, trigger warnings for all of these, very important. I will repeat myself for every single book. Now the next book, I might have to read you the synopsis because I don't remember it too well. I remember liking it though. I remember being, like, I wasn't totally obsessed with it, but I did like it, and I do think that there is a certain type of person that would really enjoy this. This kind of, but not really, reminded me of Yellow Jackets, but make it apocalyptic and more YA. A little bit more toned down. I really love this cover. I think my best friend gave me this book, if I remember correctly. It's been a while. It's been a while since I've had it, and a while since I've read it. But I think this is also maybe kind of the odd one out in this. Well, there's a few that aren't like as similar to the others, but I do still think this fits into the category. I just tried to summarize this book, but I kind of don't remember it too well, and I also don't want to give anything away, so I will read you the synopsis for this. And I keep forgetting to say stuff, but this is Wilder Girls by Rory Power. It's been 18 months since the Rexter School for Girls was put under quarantine, since the toxid and pulled Hetty's life out from under her. It started slow. First the teachers died, one by one. Then it began to infect the students, turning their bodies strange. Left to fend for themselves on their island home, the girls don't dare wander outside the school fence, where the tox has made the woods wild and dangerous. As it seeps into everything, they wait for the cure they were promised. But when her best friend Bayet goes missing, Hetty will do anything to find her, even if it means breaking the quarantine and braving the horrors that lie outside. And when she does, Hetty learns that there is more to their story, to the tox in their life at Rexter, than she ever thought possible. That is Wilder Girls, and like I said, not the biggest fan, but I do think it's quite an enjoyable read, and it's not, well, it is quite heavy, but it's not as heavy as the other books on this list, and it's definitely still the odd one out, like I said. But I do think it qualifies as this subgenre because it's girls trying to do their best to survive. And I cannot, with all of my might, recommend this to you because this was supposed to have a sequel, and the sequel's never going to come. So it's a very open end. And that's all I can say on that. Next book. Oh, I also do not know what I rated this, so don't ask me. I'm sorry for pushing you. I didn't mean to. I swear. The next book is very much falls into the obsessive girl category, and I think that's also quite a common theme in these type of books, if you want to call it that subgenre. And this is I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel. And it's a very short book, so I never think reading short books can be a bad experience. I still think even if you didn't like the book, at least you read a book, if that makes sense. But yeah, Sheena Patel is very good at writing, well, based on this one book that I read by her, at writing really obsessive, somewhat relatable, little bit insane girly pops, and this is one of them. I'm a Fan follows an unnamed narrator who is obsessed with a man she somewhat knows. I think they've had some encounters with one another to keep it family friendly, and she stalks him flat out on the internet. I think maybe at times in real life, I can't remember. And while stalking him, she finds out the person that she finds the person that he's actually with, and she falls completely besotted and obsessed with this woman. And this woman doesn't know her. She doesn't know she exists, but she gets obsessed. She starts being places that she's at just to know what her life is like, which is her way of romanticizing the stalker behavior that's happening. But I somewhat not get it, but I see where she's coming from. I wouldn't do it, but I see where she's coming from, and it's really, I think, maybe the most obsessive book I could think of. That's what I'm a Fan is about. I'm not the biggest fan of I'm a Fan, but I do think I would read this author again, and I do think I would recommend this to people if you just want to read a quick and easy and somewhat silly but exciting book. Now, if you're still watching this video and are willing to continue to do so, I'm very glad you are, because you could just take a screenshot and run with this list, but you're deciding to listen to me and listen to my recommendations. And the next author is a very big present in this genre, and it's none other than Emma Cline. The next two books will be hers, and I really want to get my hands on her other book or books. I know there's one called Daddy. She is the queen of weird girl literary fiction, and The Girls, like Spoilt Creatures, is a very culty book. This is them. And I read this on summer vacation, and I think there's no greater time to read this as the next book as well. Emma Cline has a very summery feel to all of her books, and a very sticky, sweaty feel. And this is The Girls. I'm not trying to summarize it. I remember it quite fondly, but I don't remember it enough to tell you about it. So let me read you. Evie Boyd is 14 and desperate to be noticed. It's the summer of 1969, and restless, empty days stretch ahead of her, until she sees them. The girls. Hair long and uncombed, jewelry catching the sun, and at their center, Suzanne, black-haired and beautiful. If not for Suzanne, she might not have gone. But, intoxicated by her and the life she promises, Evie follows the girls back to the decaying ranch where they live. Was there a warning, a sign of what was coming, or did Evie know already that there was no way back? Emma Cline is taking it home. The way she writes, and that's one of the reasons I keep on going back to her books, because she just has a way with words. And I think this is my favorite of the two I've read of hers. And like I said, and like you just heard, she joins a cult. There's no way around it. It's a cult. You can't justify what's happening there. There's a heavy focus on the power dynamic these girls face with the leader of this cult, of this branch, and the things that they are promised but never given, and the abuse they suffer. And yeah, it's a lot. It's a coming of age story in some ways, and does this switch in perspectives as well? Similar to Spoiled Creatures, I think it doesn't as often change perspective as Spoiled Creatures does, because it does do that like every 2 chapters. And I think in The Girls, there's just sporadic moments in between where it switches to grown up, Evie, and she's kind of experiencing this life outside of what happened. And there's a lot of people who know about the situation because it was a big thing involving celebrity culture and whatnot. And that is The Girls by Emma Cline. I think I rated this at 4 stars. And that's a very good 4 stars from me. And I do recommend this if you're interested in the ways a girl can enter a cult and be absolutely traumatized. First of all, let's give it up for the floppiness of this one. This is, like I said, another one of Emma Cline's, and this is The Guest. And I think it's not a lot of people's favorite, but I do think it's still a very well done book. Like I said, very summery themes, and this, out of all of the ones I already talked about, this is the most unlikable main character. I can definitely see why. I just really like reading about unlikable characters, and all of the mistakes they make. Just seems very human and maybe not realistic at all. Well, not specifically about this book, but maybe not always maybe realistic. But I do think it's very fun and relatable to read about, and all people make mistakes. So when an unlikable character does it, I just tend to sympathize with them. We follow Alex, who used to have a thing with an older rich man, and she was very much involved in his life and the rich community that followed him around. And she loved it, she enjoyed it, she loved the attention. And then one day that gets taken away from her, and she, instead of dealing with the things she went through and with the things she heard and saw, and finding herself and finding her footing in the real world again, she decides to stir up some drama in the rich world and just break and enter, steal, befriend people just to be part of that world still. And like I said, very messy and chaotic, but very entertaining to read about. Yeah, you just follow this messy and chaotic girl who's just trying to make her way through a world that isn't really hers to be in, but she really wants to be part of it. And this is maybe one of the most well-known books on this list. I think if you are into these books, of course you know a lot of them, but if you do want to get into this genre, I think this is a good list to get a start off. Like I said, a lot of big ones not mentioned because I do not own them yet. But these are the ones that I have, and this one is well known. The next one is The Virgin Suicide by Jeffrey Eugenius, and it's a very beloved book. And before I tell you my own opinion, I will tell you more about the book. The Virgin Suicide follows five sisters. They're the Lisbon sisters, because that's her last name, and we learn about the ways that society, and especially men and the patriarchy, has wronged all of these girls. A lot of the things that weren't going well with mental health back in the day, and just many awful things that lead to all of these girls themselves, which is not a spoiler because that's literally the name of the book. I do think it's interesting because this book is from the perspective of boys who knew the girls, and they remember and retell their memories of the girls and what they know happened to the girls, and because they were literally part of what happened to the girls. While it is a very lyrical and poetic and somewhat realistic book, I didn't enjoy the perspective, and that is why I enjoyed the movie a bit more, maybe because it was directed by Sofia Coppola, which is of course a woman. But I always struggle with men writing these type of stories. I think if this was a female author who wrote from the perspective of these boys, I would have enjoyed this a lot more. My opinion on this book, I also didn't underline quite a bunch. But like I said, I think you should give this your own try. I don't want to steer you away from this book. And the next book is another queen of weird girl literature, and she might be my favorite so far in this group, and it's Mona Awad with Bunny. And I will later talk about another book of hers. Bunny is also a somewhat culty book, but a very different cult from the books that I've just talked about. Bunny follows Samantha, the main character, who's attending this very fancy men's university, where she's, I think, if I remember correctly, studying literature. And she finally managed to join this very special writing course in that university, and there she meets the girls who, up until that point, she thought were weird and crazy and insane. And then she gets kind of obsessed with them and wants to learn more about them and kind of be part of them. And Samantha's a very unreliable narrator, and she then starts hanging out with these girls who call themselves Bunny. They seriously call themselves Bunny. They say, "I love you, Bunny, how are you, Bunny?" And they don't have names. And I remember at one point in the book, I forgot all of the names because we learned them at the beginning. and they were mentioned quite a bit because it was an interesting thing that they called themselves Bunny, but we've heard the names quite a bunch, but there was a point where my brain just couldn't recall the names because they kept on saying Bunny, which I thought was very well done. I really like that. When she finally hangs out with them, she learns quite a bunch of messy things about their friend group and the things they get up to, and I don't want to give too much away because it's very fun and interesting to read about. I do think a lot of people might not like this because it's very messy and you truly do not know what's actually happening, what's being made up, and it, like I said, she's an unreliable narrator, so you don't know if she's actually seeing that or if she's high or if she imagined that, and there's a lot of points that attribute to that. It's an interesting read. There's also a sequel slash prequel coming out to this, so I'm very excited to not get my questions answered, but be probably left with even more questions than I'm already But I've read this once, and I'm very much thinking about rereading this because I enjoyed it quite a bunch. And if you know anything about me, I love Dark Academia, and this very much meets in the middle of Dark Academia, but very heavy on the weird girlism because they are quite frankly insane, and I love them for it. I'm noticing quite a pattern with all of these books, and that is the fact that I've read most of these in summer. And I do think there's a reason for that. These books are just all very sticky and sweaty and disgusting, and that just reminds me of summer in the best ways possible. I mean that as a term of endearment. And this as well. This is Dogs of Summer. Stuck in a working class neighborhood high up among Tenerife's volcanoes, a 10-year-old girl dreams of hitching a ride to the faraway beach. Instead, she hangs out with her best friend, Izora. She likes everything about Izora, from the color of her arms and her hair and her eyes to the way she writes the letter G with a huge tail. But she envies her too. Envies her grits and gut, her periods and her pubes, the way she's growing up at the full tilt without her. As the summer goes on and the heat becomes ever more oppressive, friendship simmers into obsession, desire into intimate violence. I might just have to reread this summer. I don't want to pinpoint it, but I think this might be the most disgusting but the most real books out of all of these because it's very much girlhood, growing up with a best friend that you can't help but kind of fall in love with, but also be obsessed with, and then also hate with your guts because of those reasons. And it's very realistic, and it's cruel at the same time, and it's beautiful, and it's messy, and it's chaotic, and it's just really encapsulated girlhood very well. The next book I've talked about on my channel quite a bunch of times, because recently there was just adapted into a movie, which we shall not mention. Let's just say that. And it's Nightbitch by Rachel Yoda. Loved the cover so much, and this is definitely a weird book, and a fair book, and a questionable book. But it's so... I just keep on saying this with all of these books. I keep using the same words because they are just that. They're so real, but it's also magical realism, and it's also very much same thing as Bunny, which you don't know what's actually happening, what's not what's being imagined, and that's where the movie went completely wrong. But Nightbitch follows an unnamed narrator, you know the drill, called Mother. She's just a mother. That's her only thing. Like a lot of mothers sadly have to go through. She's a mother, and that already summarizes this book, because this is a mother who loves her son but hates being a mother, and I think that's a very important topic to talk about. And while that is what's happening, there's also the symbolic part of her thinking she's turning into a dog. That starts with her thinking she's growing fur, and then she's growing fangs, and then all of a sudden she thinks she has a tail, and then she thinks she's actually a dog. And all of that's happening, she's balancing the love-hate relationship she has with motherhood, and the horrible relationship she has to the father of her son. It's one of the most poetic ones of this list, and the symbolism and the female empowerment in this It's just brilliant. There's also a lot of involvement around art and being women together and generational connections between mothers, and there's just so much powerful and wonderful symbolism in here. And it's messy and it's disgusting at times and it's crazy, but it's so brilliant. 5 stars. If you want to take any recommendations, let it be this. Nightbitch is wonderful. I don't even know if I can say that word on here, but I just did, so. You either get this book or you don't. And I find it fascinating that I get this book because I'm not a mother, nor maybe will I ever be, but it's very powerful, and I think it says quite a bunch about motherhood. This is New Animal by Ella Baxter. And I'm not gonna try to summarize this. I have mixed feelings on this book, so to say, but she's very much so an unlikable character, the main girl, but you still like her. That's all I have to say, and let me read you the summary. Amelia is no stranger to sex and death. Her job as a cosmetic mortician at her family's funeral parlor might be unusual, but she's good at it. When it comes to meeting people who are still breathing, she uses dating apps. Combining with someone else's body at night, Amelia can become something else, at least for a while. But when a sudden loss severs the ties with someone she loves, Amelia sets off on a 72-hour mission to outrun her grief. Skipping out on the funeral, running away to stay with her father in Tasmania, and experimenting on a local BDSM scene. There, she learns even more about sex, death, grief, and the different ways pain works its way through the body. It will take a pair of fathers, a bruising encounter with a stranger, and recognition of her own body's limits to bring Amelia back to herself. And just reading that back, I actually liked this book a lot. It just was a lot to read about. I do think I liked the first half of this book more because I did underline quite a bit, and I remember I just reread that for a little second, and it all just bring back a lot of memories. I cried. There was in the first chunk of this book, there's a part that really made me cry surrounding the topic of grief, and I think the realistic coping with grief, of course, everyone copes different, but I think this crazy, animalistic, harmful way of coping was very nice to read about because it's usually not depicted quite often. This book is. I love this slip so much. It's Things We Say in the Dark by Kirsty Logan. And this is the only short story collection I have this on the shelf. The characters in this collection find their aspirations for happy homes, happy families, and happy memories dissected and imbued with shimmering menace. Alone in a remote house in Iceland, a woman is unnerved by her isolation. Another can only find respite from the clinging ghost that follows her by submerging herself in an overgrown pool. Couples wrestle with a lack of connection to their children. A schoolgirl becomes obsessed with the female anatomical models in a museum, and a cheery account of a child's day out is undercut by chilling footnotes. These dark tales explore women's fears with electrifying honesty and invention, and speak to one another about female bodies, domestic claustrophobia, desire, and violence. And there's Things We Say in the Dark. Definitely recommend this if you want to maybe read some short stories and get into the gritty, nitty parts of being a female in this day and age. And this is another queen of this genre, which I have sadly only have one book by, but it's Eliza Clark with Boy Parts. And boy, do I love Boy Parts. This is definitely 5-star read. Boy Parts follows Irina, who is kind of stuck in her way of life. She's kind of bored, and she's a photographer, and she photographs mostly young men in a very vulnerable state, and she starts getting kind of obsessive and violent with them. To keep it at that, this is very much so the strongest contender of the I support women's rights and I support women's wrongs. That's Irina for you. She's not necessarily unlikable, she's also not likable, and She's very much into drugs and alcohol, and she gets hurt, and so she decides to hurt back. Enjoy. I think I've heard some people say that, and I think I've said this as a recommendation to other people as well. This is American Psycho, but make it a woman who actually has a reason for doing all these things, even if it's still a not good thing to do. She has a reason. Okay, let her do her thing. My God, it's fiction. This is another strong voice in this genre, and it's Otasha Moshfegh. I sadly only have read this book by her. I definitely want to read her other books, and I cannot believe I haven't yet, but I keep on forgetting that I want to read it. This is Eileen, and while this is not my favorite out of the shelf, it definitely made me desperately want to read her other books because she writes wonderfully. And this is the only book in this list, and maybe Things We Say in the Dark, that I would more so read in winter. This book follows Eileen, like the title says, who is kind of stuck in her small town life, with on the one hand having her drunk father, and on the other hand working at a young boy's prison. There she of course hears and sees a lot of horrible things, and she also there meets Rebecca, who she quite frankly gets completely obsessed with, and they kind of start this friendship, which is also very sapphic. And while that friendship is blossoming, one day Rebecca invites her over, and Eileen suddenly is part of a very big crime. If it did anything, like I said, it made me want to read more of Otasha Moshfegh's books, and this definitely leans more into a not necessarily thriller, but it's a very crime-centered book, but it's also sapphic, and it's also a woman kind of taking their revenge because of the shitty lives they've been dealt with, and that's Eileen, and let's finally get to the last book. This might just be the physically biggest book in this collection, even though I think the other book by this author, which is Bunny, is the longest one, but this is Rouge by Mona Awad, and this is a pretty recent publication, I think 2023, and like I mentioned with Bunny, mostly with all of Mona Awad's book, you don't know what's actually happening. It's very hallucinatic, and you're like, is this happening, or is this person imagining this? And that's also the same with Rouge. I still do not know what this book even. I know what it is about, but I'm still confused, but in the best way possible. I love that fact about her books. And like I said with Bunny, I do think not a lot of people would enjoy this as much as I did, but I do really like her work, and she's just a little crazy, but I think in that way she also deals with a lot of important topics, and because it's so confusing, I will have to read you the summary. For as long as she can remember, Belle has been obsessed with skin and skincare videos. When her estranged mother, Noelle, mysteriously dies, Belle finds herself back in Southern California, dealing with her mother's considerable debts and grappling with lingering questions about her death. The stakes escalate when a strange woman in red appears at the funeral, offering a tantalizing clue about her mother's demise, followed by a cryptic video about a transformative spa experience. With the help of the Red Shoes, Belle is lured into the barbed embrace of La Maison de Medusa, the same lavish, culty spa to which her mother was devoted. There, Belle discovers the frightening secret behind her and her mother's obsession with the mirror, and the great shimmering depths and demons that lurk on the other side of the glass. So, of course, this book deals a lot with grief and a lot with the fucked up conspiracies in the beauty industry, especially around LA, and just the sick and twisted ways people will try to get beautiful or more beautiful than I think they are, and the lengths they will go to do that, which is kind of crazy. And she gets involved with this, and it's also kind of culty, and it's very much like what's happening, like I said, but it deals with grief and being a daughter to a mother who also had a mother, and I thought that was brilliant. And we just stay with Belle as she tries to find her way in life, and gets thrown around by a lot of people, and she's learning about her mother's death more and more throughout this book, and it's a very interesting book to read. And I also have to show you the back of the book because it's supposed to look like a mirror, and I thought that was sweet. And this is Rouge by Mona Awad. Bunny's definitely my favorite out of these two. I haven't read her other books yet. And like I said, there's a new one coming out. And so I'm very excited to read that one when I get my hands on it. I wish I had an art copy of We Love You, Bunny, but I do not. And that is Rouge. Like I said, I like Bunny more, but I still like this a lot. And if the beauty industry in this, if the miserable beauty industry interests you, and you also have a mother, read this book. And those are all the books. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you got any recommendations at all. And if you managed to watch this far, thank you so much. Genuinely means a lot to me that I'm not just yapping into the void. That's scary because there's literally just darkness behind. That's it. I truly do hope you got a recommendation out of this, and please leave me one in the comments as well. And I would love to talk about some of these books. See you in the next one, Bunny.